When I bought this watch, I thought it'd be a bit of cheap fun. I didn't actually put that much thought into the purchase. I just sort of thought, wow, that's really cheap. It's really different. It's a bit fun. Let's buy it. What I didn't expect was it to be actually this well made. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James. You're watching me, and I'm talking about watches. And today, I'm talking about a bit of a weird watch. This Earnshaw Scientist. And I know that this is not going to be for everybody. I understand that people are going to look at this and go, why did you buy that? And personally, I sort of had the same thought, but I just thought it looked so much fun and so interesting, and it was so affordable that I kind of wanted to experience it. And really, if this was going to be my only watch in my collection, there's no way I would have bought it. But because I have a bit of a range of watches now, I have a bit of a spot in my collection that allows me to buy something a little bit fun, perhaps a little bit wacky, and just to experience something different on wrist. And for $90 US, I thought, well, that's not too much money. I think I'm going to be okay spending that and trying something a little bit different. I bought this watch off Ashford.com. I paid full price. This is not a sponsored video, but I am an affiliate member with Ashford.com now. And if you're interested in this watch, I will leave a link down below in the description of the video. Now, normally I would not recommend this brand. Normally I would not be interested in buying this brand. It doesn't have a particularly good reputation out there, so I had no interest in buying it. And that wasn't until I saw this watch at this price. When I did that, I then had a bit more of a look at the brand, and I realized they've got a lot of very interesting watches out there. It's not going to be everybody's style, and to be honest, most of them aren't my style either. But if you happen to like one of them and you get it at the right price, then I think you're actually going to end up with a fairly well-made watch. Because if it's made anywhere near as well as this, and you get it for a price like I got this one, then you may end up with a really good watch in your collection that's a bit of fun, reasonably well-made, and didn't cost you too much money. So let's flip the camera now, and let's check out my Thomas Earnshaw Scientist. So on paper, this Thomas Earnshaw is probably a bit of a strange choice. But what you sort of end up getting is an affordable, sort of almost cheap, sort of interesting, weird, dressy kind of watch maybe. Unknown movement inside of it. Hasn't got a best reputation, this particular brand. Quality is a bit unknown. But because it was so affordable and it looks so interesting, I really wanted to try it out. And I'm not even really sure what style of watch this is. It feels a little bit sporty, but it only has 50 meters of water resistance, so I'm not quite sure what it's going for. For me, it's an affordable, interesting watch. And there's some things about it that really impress me, some things that I really like, but then there's a bit of the opposite going on, and I want to run you through that. But first of all, I think it's worth knowing the size of this watch, because it's not a particularly small watch, but strangely enough, it sort of sits on wrist quite nicely. The case itself is 44 millimeters. It is 15.4 millimeters wide. Now that may seem like a lot, but it doesn't actually feel like that when it's on wrist. Lug to lug is 51.3 millimeters. Lug width is 22 millimeters. And on this bracelet, which is actually one of the features of this watch, is 150 grams. Now, when you look at the dial of this one, there's almost 2 or 3 dials going on there, because you've got this little sub-dial here, which is the actual watch itself, showing the time. No running second hand. But then you have a silver sort of back around. But then you have these cutaways with these dual balance wheels, which is really kind of interesting. But let's look a little bit closer, because firstly, that blue on the actual dial of the watch itself, really nice, and has a bit of a sort of almost a sunburst effect to it. Everything that's written on there is printed on. It's printed on sort of like a white silver color, white hands, and it's actually surprisingly legible, even though that part of it is rather small. The silver behind on the dial is also a sunburst effect. And strangely enough, they've written automatic. I think it's 50 joules there, or 40 joules. I'm not a big fan of that text written there, but I guess they're just trying to fill in that space. Underneath that, we're obviously showing off these twin balance bridges here and the twin balance wheels. And there's a fair bit cut out. That's probably one of the negatives for me as well. I think they've cut too much away. And if you look a little bit closer down the bottom there, you'll see these blue screws. They're definitely not blued, but they do add a nice little bit of flash of color down there, and then links into the dial of the watch face itself. And then the gold there sort of balances out as well with those balance bridges there. I think it's really quite interesting. It's sort of a different looking watch. I certainly admit this, but I quite like it. And what it's covered by is probably the best piece of mineral crystal that I've seen. Look at this. It's really, really nice. And because it's a 44mm case diameter with pretty much no bezel, it's a big piece of crystal there. And it's really cool. It almost looks like a halo effect over all of what is going on under there. And when we sort of look on a bit of an angle, you can see how much of a 3D effect is going on with that dial, with those things that are happening underneath that crystal. So there's absolutely no lume to show you. So let's jump into the bezel, which is polished. We then got a bit of brushing on the top of those lugs, which are actually quite small and hidden when you sort of look at the size of this watch and look at everything. But they're brushed, and then we jump into some polishing on the sides. That brushing and polishing is actually done quite well. You'll see the crown there though, it is rather small, and that's definitely a bit of a problem with this one. It's pretty good and pretty easy to set the time, but this movement, which I have no idea what this movement is, does have hand winding. I'm not sure if it has hacking because there's no second hand, but to hand wind it, it's very difficult. Mostly because it's small, but it also is fairly tight. But you definitely can, as you can see, I'm using my nails to actually do that. But when you pull it out, I don't think there's a ghost position. I think it goes straight into time movement. You can then adjust the time. Now, I have absolutely no idea what the movement is inside this watch. It doesn't say it anywhere on any of the websites where I bought it or from the Thomas Earnshaw website either. So I'm not quite sure how it's going to perform on the time grapher, but I'm quite interested to see what it's going to be like. So let's see how it's performing. Now, I have absolutely no idea what movement is inside this, so I'm not sure what to do with the lift angle. So this is probably going to be affecting the results a little bit. I've set it for 52, which is kind of the default lift angle for movements. It may or may not be the right angle, I don't know. But the movement's running at 21,600 vibrations per hour. A little bit of bit error, not too bad. Amplitude's rather low, but that's probably the figure that we're going to be most concerned with. Because this is not an everyday watch, it's something a little bit fun and affordable. To be honest, it doesn't worry me too much, but I guess that is a very high number and probably higher than I would like. Now, the bracelet on this watch is actually a bit of a standout feature. Solid links, push pin sort of design there, but it actually feels really nice. Much better than what the price of this watch sort of represents. And having a really nice quality bracelet really does improve the feel of this watch in hand and on wrist. Unfortunately, it does fall down a little bit when it gets to the clasp because this butterfly clasp is not a particularly good one. It's okay and it's functional, but sometimes when you're putting it back on, you have to really crunch it on just like that. It works. It's never come off my wrist, and I've been wearing this watch a fair bit. It's fine, but sometimes you just have to give it that extra bit of a push. So it's okay, but to be honest, I'd much prefer a sort of normal style clasp. When we look past that clasp at the movement, you can see there's actually a fair bit of decoration and some blued screws there. Obviously blued coloured, not blued with heat, but a fair bit of decoration. It's actually not a bad movement to have a look at. And again, at this price, and I'm saying that a fair bit, but it is true, at this price, I'm rather impressed. And on wrist, it's actually really comfortable. I wear this one a little bit loose because there is no micro adjust, but that's actually okay with me because I like wearing watches a little bit loose anyway, so that doesn't bother me too much. But I guess that's a bit of a negative as well, that you can't really get a perfect fit because of that clasp. It does make it very neat then under your wrist, but yeah, I'd rather some micro adjust rather than have that sort of neat factor. But when you're thinking 44mm, you would think that would look absolutely huge on my wrist. And to be honest, I think it looks okay. It certainly looks interesting. This watch is very interesting. And it's actually reasonably well made. I'm sort of saying, yeah, it feels good. The case feels good. The crystal feels good. The bracelet feels good. It makes the watch feel good. So what do I like? What don't I like? And what would I change? Well, more than most watches, I've actually got a fair bit to say here. I have to say from a like perspective, I like how much fun it is. It has been fun. It's something that really makes me smile. It's very different. It was affordable. I love that crystal. I like the colour of the blue and the silver together. They are my colours. Really impressed by that bracelet. It is much better than I expected, and I've enjoyed it more than I expected. But there's some dislikes going on here. I don't like that text on the dial there. I think that's a little bit weird. I think the cutaway is cut away too much. I think that could be pushed in a little bit and just sort of showing off those balance bridges a little bit more without all that background. Personally, I'm not a big fan of yellow gold, so I think that would be better if it was blue and then silver. I think that would look better too. The movement is an unknown movement, and as you saw in the time grapher, it's not performing very well. The crown's tiny and it is a little bit hard to use. It's certainly very hard to manually wind. And that clasp, yeah, it really does get a bit sticky. There we go, got it on there. You can see it's quite sticky. So what would I change? Well, there is a bunch of stuff. Get rid of that text. I would like to see a running second on as well. I prefer running seconds on a dial. Change the colours of those balance bridge. Bring in that back of the dial a little bit, tuck it in a little bit. Increase the size of that crown, make that actually easy to use. Put a normal style clasp on here so you can actually sort of adjust it more, better to fit. A known movement would certainly be good as well. But to be honest, I'm not sure what sort of known movement you could put in there that has this at this sort of price. And I want to talk about that price a little bit more. So let's get back to me and let's discuss price. Now I bought this watch off ashford.com and it cost $90 US. But as I do every single time I buy a watch, I shop around. I went onto the original website of Thomas Earnshaw and they were asking kind of stupid money for it. So I wasn't going to be buying it from them. I looked at other websites and there were sort of better prices. But as I've always generally found that ashford.com seems to have the cheapest price if they have the watch that you want. So that's where I obviously bought it from. And for $90 US, I thought, well, that's pretty cheap. The watch looks kind of fun. I'm okay with that price, even if I end up not wearing it, even if I end up not getting my money back. It's something fun, different, interesting, and cheap. But to be honest, I kind of expected the watch to be a bit crap. But when it arrived, I was kind of shocked how well it was made. Now, obviously, as I've just shown you, it's not perfect. There's some issues with it. It's not the best made watch in the world, but it's so much better than I expected. I really expected this watch to feel really cheap. And although it is definitely an affordable watch and feels like an affordable watch, it feels so much better than I expected, especially for that sort of price. And of course, whenever I buy a watch, I always consider, well, if I'm buying that watch in that sort of style, what else could I get for the same sort of money? And in this case, it was very difficult to find anything else that had this sort of look, and now that I know this sort of quality, for that sort of price. Now, when I first saw this watch, I have to admit, I kind of thought it looked a little bit like the Christopher Ward Bel Canto. Obviously, it looks nothing like the Christopher Ward Bel Canto, but there are some features about it that sort of made me think that. It's one of the reasons why I bought it, because I thought, well, I get a bit of that sort of feel, that sort of look, this big sort of dome crystal, because I like the Bel Canto, but for $5,500, I don't like it that much. But for $90 US, oh, I thought I might have a bit of a feel about it on wrist. And really, besides that, besides maybe other sort of funky, weird stuff off Aliexpress, I haven't got any other watches that I could really compare it against. Because if you like this, even if you think it's fun, for $90 US, that's not a lot of money. And guys, if you like this watch, or you want to see any other reviews that I've done, maybe check these two videos out next.